one thing she kept hold, she kept that ponytail though. She went on back, thank you, Jesus, and kept her purse, you understand me? You know it's bad when you're still in church, you know what I'm saying? It's rough, man. We living in some crazy, crazy days.
My stage name is BLT. My government name is Bryant Lee Turner. This is how I came up with BLT. When I started comedy, I used to call myself BT, but it was someone who had that name copywritten. So this is how I ended up with BLT. I'm the baby boy of 3 kids. I have 2 older sisters. One of my sisters passed. Growing up, I was very spoiled because I was the baby and the only boy. So what happened was my mother and my father worked. My aunt, my great-great-great aunt, raised me. I would stay with my mother and father on the weekends, and when I was, like I say, a baby. And when I became, old enough to go to school, which was 6 years old, because back then your birthday had to fall at a certain period of time for you to be able to start in September. And mine didn't, it was in January. So long story short, I ended up staying with my aunt on weekdays, my mother and father on the weekends, and then when I started school, I started staying with my mother on the weekends, my auntie on the weekends, and my mother on the weekdays. And my mother and father divorced when I was about 8. So mainly around me growing up were women. I guess the people that I looked at as strength were women, because the majority of the women that I were around, whether I was around, were strong Black women, not physically, but mentally. So my mother, she worked. I went to Catholic school. I grew up good middle class, but I loved the streets. I always loved the streets. So around my mother's house, I would have friends. We played baseball. I was on little league teams and things of that nature. But what happened is when I went, my aunt, she stayed in Chatham around 79th and King Drive. So over there, I got introduced to the gangs. First it was the neighborhood guys you hung with, and as I got older, teenager, it went into gang banging. So I went into gang banging because I had no brothers, and whatever I got into, it was just me. So with them, I had a family. If something jumped off, I could call my guys or go get them, and they would help me, if I was in a situation. So growing up, I guess, school was never something that I cared about. Like I told you, I started a year late. Then my mother put me back in 2nd grade, so I was 2 years behind. What helped me was I didn't go to school in the neighborhood I lived in, so a lot of them didn't know that I was 2 years behind, So, but long story short, as far as I went to school was 8th grade. That was it for me. I was done with school. That's as far as I went. In high school, I did go to Finger High School for like a month, and they put me out. And then I went to a school called Industrial Skills Center, which was for troubled youth. And I went there for about 2 months. But other than that, that was it. I was always a hustler. When I mean hustle, even as a kid, I cut grass. I had my customers that I would cut grass. I had my customers I would rake leaves. I had my customers I would clean windows, from taking the storm windows out and putting screens in every year. So I've always been the type of hustler that I play the long game. I don't say play the short game. So whatever I got into it was gonna residual. It was gonna constantly go. Not just this summer, next summer I could do it, and the summer after that. So that's how I really looked at, working or hustling or whatever. I've always looked at it as something that can constantly go, not just, I'm not trying to get a big payday and that's it. So in doing that, as well as everybody else, when I became a teenager, one thing I did, I might hustle, but I always had some type of job. I worked at a fast food, the White Castles, the Arby's, the Kentucky Fried Chickens, and these were places that I worked, but I hustled too. I always sold a little weed. Then I got into bigger drugs. But weed was one thing that I enjoyed selling because it didn't hurt anybody. It didn't mess people's lives up. And you could still smoke some and still make money. There's no other drugs that was out there that you could do that. And so, long story short, I met a young lady probably when I was about 13. We started talking. We talked for a year on the phone. I would see her every blue moon. And then by the time I got around 15 is when we started being around each other. We would go to the show. That's what everybody, your date, you take them to the show on Sunday. But a long story short, her family were drug dealers. That was my goal in life. They would ask what all of us, my different friends, what you want to be when you grow up. I always wanted to be the biggest drug dealer in Chicago. And long story short, when I met her, when I started being around her on a regular basis and going around her family, this was something that I never knew anything about. They sold heroin. So I got introduced from weed to the real deal. And in doing that, I guess drugs at that time, everybody was trying to get into drugs. My girlfriend was 2 years younger than me. We started shooting up. I was 17, she was 15. So I went from one summer when I turned 16 from drinking beer, drinking alcohol, and end up snorting heroin. Before that, I didn't do anything. I didn't smoke cigarettes. I didn't like girls that smoked cigarettes. I didn't like the smell. And so in one summer, all this came together. And I ended up on drugs, messing with drugs. I wasn't on heroin, but I would snort it, like to be cool, I guess. But a long story short, I ended up getting in trouble and going to jail. I went to jail for a week. And by this time, I had a habit of snorting heroin and shooting up. And when I went to jail, I was in, like I say, for 1 week. That week, I guess you would call it, I detoxed that week. Because when I went to jail, I wasn't trying to be on nothing but trying to get out of there. So when I did get out, I left heroin alone. That was something that I looked at my life and I looked at the people who were using it, and I was like, I don't want to end up like them. You know what I'm saying? These were people that got up every day to go hustle, steal, whatever they had to do in order to get this drug that they needed for their body. So in the meantime, I ended up meeting this guy, and he was a hustler, and he introduced me to cocaine. So when he introduced me to cocaine, me and my girlfriend, my oldest kid's mother, and his girl. So long story short, he introduced me into smoking cocaine, which was the worst thing that ever could happen. And during the 80s, this is what everybody was into. And a long story short, I ended up being hooked. My kid's mother ended up being hooked. And I ended up going into treatment. I went into treatment at Jackson Park Hospital. I'll never forget that. I stayed for a week, which I was supposed to stay there for 28 days. But I saw where you could sneak out. And when I saw that, that was all I needed. So I ended up going. Long story short, I ended up going through treatments, about 5 different treatments throughout my time. But it wasn't until I got to the point where I got out of treatment one time and I was like, Chicago is my problem. I need to move from Chicago. And I did. I moved from Chicago to Atlanta. Got to Atlanta. The first night I got there, I relapsed. I just spent every dime I had, my cigarettes, anything I could sell, I sold that night. The next day, I had no money, no food, no nothing, and no family. I knew nobody in Atlanta. So long story short, this is when I got introduced to going to shelters to eat and meeting people that were homeless. And from my point of view, before I knew anything about that, I always looked down on people like that. Oh, they bums, they this, that. I was actually, a lot of those people that are in those situations are in there because this is what they choose to do. Society had beat them up so bad where I was out there with doctors, I was out there with, people that had careers. That when you look at them, you looked at them as a bum, but they really weren't bums. They had degrees and careers, but life had just beat them so bad till they wanted to disappear. And being homeless, you can disappear. You don't have to worry about Social Security. You don't have to worry about anything. Only thing you worry about is eating every day, and if you have a drug problem, getting your drugs every day. That's the thing. I learned so much from them, what shelters you could go to get what type of food. I was taught go by office buildings and get cigarettes off the ground because they put them out long because they have to run back in a lot of times. So I learned different things. I learned how to, you know what I'm saying, not take life for granted. It's really, to me, no disrespect, but that was one of the best lessons that I had ever been through. You never know how life is until you go through something, truly go through something. And a lot of people talk about, not having money or anything. The worst thing I went through was being hungry. Mm-hmm. Being hungry is a process that a lot of people take for granted because we have food. It's always right there ready, you can get it, you can go over somebody's house and they'll feed you. But it's times in people's life where they don't have anybody. And I was one of those people. I lived in Atlanta, I had no family or anything. So my thing was, what I started doing was going to day labor. Mm-hmm. And I would go to day labor. And when I got to Atlanta, let me go back a little bit, I was getting unemployment here. So long story short, my mother would fill my sheet out, send my money down to me. So when I got to Atlanta, I ended up renting a room from a guy. He was like, I was like, well, I don't want to be around drugs, man. He said, no, they don't use drugs there. Some people might drink and blah, blah, blah. Long story short, when I got there, I ended up renting this room and they were people on drugs. I walked right down the street is where they sold the drugs. So this is how I relapsed that first night. Mm-hmm. So once because I had paid up for like 2 weeks. You paid every 2 weeks for your room. So long story short, I started going to day labor and they never picked me. Never picked me. I had 2 days left before I needed to get some money to pay for me where I was staying at. Mm-hmm. And it just so happened they called out everybody this particular day and I just sat around because I ain't had nowhere to go, nothing to do. And it just so happened a gentleman from Brown's College called and he needed 4 gentlemen to help move furniture. If I didn't know how to do nothing, I know how to move furniture. So long story short, we went that day, we worked that day, got our pay that night, came back the next day, and the gentleman called back and said, I want the same 4 guys, but I want them for 2 months. That was, being a blessing. Mm-hmm. People look at religious stuff. I'm a spiritual person. So I looked at it was like the spiritual world is moving. My ancestors is putting me in places and opening doors for me. So long story short, I end up working those 2 months. In the meantime, I end up getting a job at the Marriott. Mm-hmm. And getting this job at the Marriott, I end up in laundry, working in the laundry. I didn't like that, but you have to start somewhere. So I worked there for a while. I worked a week, and in 1 week they had an opening for the night janitor to clean the laundry room. I applied for that. I got that job. Now, mind you, that was a perfect job for me because nobody's looking over your shoulders. You start at 11, you off at 7. You know, you clean up, you blow the machines off and things of that nature. So long story short, I start elevating at the Marriott. They had another position open for groundskeeper. I didn't know nothing about it, but what I would do is walk around and watch the guy that did that. So then when I had took the, you have a test, I knew things because I watched him. Long story short, I got that job. Then they had an opening for called a room PM person. That was a person that fixed anything in the room that breaks. Like if you call down there, my sink is messed up or blah, I was the person that came. And I ended up getting that job. So long story short, I was doing fine, had a decent job, went to work, came home, no drugs or anything. But I made a mistake and asked one of my kids' mothers to come and move to Atlanta with me, which she was still getting high. So when she came back, well, one thing led to another. I started drinking non-alcoholic beer. That was my downfall. So then I was drinking that. I was like, well, I want a real beer. It ain't gonna kill me. So I ended up back on drugs with me and her. Long story short, me and her got into it one night. I ended up fighting her. She ended up fighting me. She ended up stabbing me. I ended up cracking her skull. And I ended up getting a case for attempted murder. I was in there for 4 days. And what happened was she dropped charges, I dropped charges. She moved back to Chicago. That's how I got out of that. But a long story short, I started back using. So I was using, I met a young lady while I was in Atlanta. Her name was Rachel, and she was using, but I was telling her, I want to get my life together. We need to get our life together, and we can do it together. Long story short, boom. So we end up talking, and this is what we're gonna do. So the last time I ever used drugs was December 7th, 1992. I went and I spent my whole check. Went back to these guys, asked for credit. They wouldn't give me credit or anything. So I pawned them my car for one bag, $20 bag. And I ended up smoking that bag and didn't feel anything. So I was tired. I was like, this is it, I'm tired. I don't want to keep living like this. So I tried to commit suicide. I cut all the eyes on, blew the pilots out. But the next morning I woke up with a house full of gas. So I knew I had a purpose. So long story short, in the meantime, while I was working at the Marriott, my supervisor was actually my sponsor in drugs and alcohol program. So I got up that morning, walked to a payphone. I'm going into treatment. This is what I told myself. This is my 5th time. I'm going into treatment. I'm gonna get myself together, So I was on the payphone. Who pulls up out of anybody in the middle of the day was my supervisor. And I explained to him what I've been going. He said, I've been knowing what you've been going through. I just needed you to know when you were tired and you wanted to get yourself together. So long story short, he was like, so I called this particular program they had. It was called AD. And it was the second best treatment center in the United States at the time. And so long story short, he asked me, they told me they had a bed for me. I need to be there at such and such a time, this, that, and other. So mind you, I got my car and I left and I went. He gave me some gas money and money for cigarettes. And I went into the treatment. You go in there for, I think it's 10 days detox. Now mind you, I was supposed to get these people this car because I had pawned it to them, but I took the car with me. Long story short, me and the young lady were talking, and who I was going with at the time, and she lived in Ohio, and I said, this is what we're gonna do. You go back to Ohio, let me finish my treatment. We found an apartment, so when she comes back, we have a place to stay. Me and her lived in a cul-de-sac in this apartment complex, was made like a U. And to this day, I would never stay anywhere that has a dead end. It just does something to me. Long story short, I went into treatment. I came out. I did my 10 days. I came out. I got with her, gave her money. She was going to wash her clothes and then leave. They caught me, the drug dealers. They jumped on me, you know, this, that, and the other. I ended up giving them some money that I owed them, this, that, and the other. So I went back in treatment for my 28 days, because you go in for 10, then you got to go in for 28. Long story short, I'm in there for the 28. This is around December. I went in around December, I'm gonna say December 15, 16. Long story short, my sponsor would come visit me. So he came to visit me like around the 23rd. And he was telling me, he was like, yeah, man, man, they found a young lady dead in y'all's building complex. And, you know, I was like, man, for real? Because a lot of people got high in that building complex. So, long story, I was like, you know her name or whatever? Come to find out it was my girlfriend. She had got murdered while I was in there. But this, I said this to say, that was the catalyst for me to get my life together. Because that night, I cried, I prayed, I talked to my ancestors, I talked to the Creator, and I said, if you allow me to get my life together, I'm gonna let her live through me. And I'm gonna do something positive with my life. And that day, from that day forward to this day, I've been clean for over 31 years now. And the reason I can say I'm there, number one, my ancestors, but number one, her. Because I think about her constantly. She was a lot younger than me, and she had so much life to live. And I always felt like, why her instead of me? But when you have a purpose, you have a purpose. So by this time, I had kids here in Chicago. I left treatment. When I got out of treatment, January 10th, I drove to Chicago. I had a Granada. I drove to Chicago. I got to Chattanooga, Tennessee. My heat went out. Now this is January. I'm coming to Chicago. You know how cold Chicago is in January. So long story short, one time I was on the highway and they shut the road down for 2 hours. I was in that car freezing. I would get off and go to rest areas to get warm. So long story short, I made it all the way to Maryville and ran out of gas. I ended up selling my watch to a trucker. He really gave me the $10. So I ended up staying with my mother. Now, mind you, me and my biological mother never really clicked. This is why I stayed with my aunt majority of the time. Mm-hmm. So I stayed with my mom's, and my sister was staying there, and she was still using. Long story short, and the doorbell ring, I answer the door, it's the dope man. So I'm dealing with trying not to use, but I would go to a meeting every time I felt that way. Mm-hmm. Long story short, I stayed with my mother for 2 weeks, got put out of there, and ended up staying with my cousin. That's when my life started changing. I ended up applying for school. I went to Coins for electrical maintenance, and I ended up getting a job at a church as a maintenance engineer or whatever. He was really a janitor, but long story short, I worked that job for 2 years. That's when comedy kicked in. I ended up, as a kid, I was always funny. Because I was thin, crooked teeth, this, that, and the other. People were signified, so I learned how to signify. So long story short, I went to an open mic. I never forget that, at the new 50-yard line in Harvey back in the day. And Leon Rogers was hosting it. It was for the Budweiser comedy competition. No, I didn't do great, but I didn't do terrible either. And it was some guys and women there that was doing this for real as a career, and they wasn't that funny. And I know I was much funnier than them. I just didn't know how. So long story short, that's when I first got my taste of being on a stage and actually doing comedy. But you can ask me, how did I end up doing comedy? My father. My father would let me tell him Richard Pryor jokes and cuss at the same time. So I would do Miss Rudolph and Mudbone and all these different characters. And he allowed me, and then at this particular time, we would go to the movie theaters to see Richard Pryor stand up. Because back then they had it at the show. So you would go see, you know, Richard Pryor. So that was my first taste of real comedy, that I knew I'm funny and this dude is awesome. That's what I want to be. So that's how I started doing comedy about 27 years ago.
Nice.
And it just, I look at comedy as therapy. That's what it is for me. Like most people have to go see a psychiatrist. I have a stage I can step on and talk about my deepest, darkest things that hurt me, but the darkest things end up being the funniest thing when you can come through it. So that's basically how I got into comedy. What comedy did in far as business and in my life, okay, my aunt that raised me had a rooming house with older people.
Yeah.
I've always had a passion for older people and people that can't help themselves. So long story short, what comedy did was comedy took me to a place that I could break the monotony. Like if I come into a room, nobody's speaking. Why y'all ain't speaking? Man, it's good to be alive. You need to smile. Girl, you got a beautiful smile. So it always gave me, even when I went for interviews before I got deep into comedy, I could sit and interview with a person and be like, I hope this ain't gonna be long. And you know I don't spell that good. You know, just something to make them feel comfortable, where I'm not just another person that sat in this seat. I'm somebody that made you laugh and made you think. And that's what I use comedy in my life for, whether it's dealing with grandchildren, my kids, or friends, or anybody. Comedy has made it where I can make anybody laugh. I can talk about a person, not to the point of hurting them, but make them laugh at themselves about some of the things they might do or what they might have on, without, you know, tearing them down.
Yeah.
I never wanted to be one of those comics that tear people down, you know.
Yeah. And what was that moment where you realized that comedy was your calling and that's what you were going to pursue?
Ah, wow. What hit me was I went on my first road trip with a Jeff B, comedian named Jeff B. And the excitement of the people seeing me on stage and me doing this material, and then on top it all off, if you were funny, then you probably get some, you know, at the end of the night, because you're on the road. That was part of the road, you know. And the women was in my face, you were funny and blah, 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 you cute, da, 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 da. I was like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do right here. Now, mind you, I didn't get paid, but I enjoyed the attention that I got. And I enjoyed how I made people feel, you know, because they would say, man, that joke, man, I lived that joke before. I've been there. So to see people, that's what gravitated me. And then I always listen to what Bernie always said. Bernie said, if you try doing this for money, you might as well leave it alone. I do comedy because I would do it if I didn't get a dime. I would do it just to make people feel good, because it makes me feel good when I see people feeling good. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's really, you know, the basis of what pushed me into wanting to do comedy as a career, is because the way it made people feel and the way it made me feel.
Okay. Okay. So what was the you know, your comedy grind like? You know, in the beginning, you know, when you went on the road, and after that, and at what point did you realize that, you know, this is something that I can actually make a living doing? And what moment was that where it's like, oh, I'm making enough money where I don't even have to work a job anymore?
I think what gave me, and I knew this is what I was gonna do, is when I did my first taping of Comic View. And I did my first taping in Comic View in New Orleans. And went down there and I was around all these comics I saw on TV, and it hit me. I'm a comedian too. I'm just like they are. I might not be well known as some of them, but I'm funny. And they're accepting me as being a comedian. And that's really what triggered me. And I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. This is how I'm gonna do it. Then I had to get to the point that I had a gentleman that took me under his wing named JD. And JD at the time was really hot. He had did his Comic View special and everything. So I would be his feature a lot of times. And in doing that, I started looking at comedy is something that can take me places that I never thought I could go. It was really the traveling that I really wanted to do with comedy, but really the traveling. So long story short, JD had, it was a gentleman that booked an overseas tour. And JD couldn't do it, and he told the gentleman about me. So he said, okay, I'll let him come over. So he booked me and two other comics from New York, a white lady and a black guy. I think they was going together or messing around, whatever, but she wasn't funny. Long story short, she was supposed to be the host. He was the headliner and I was the feature. I get over there, and what happened was doing comedy here in Chicago, I didn't get a lot of love. A lot of comics, they said I was arrogant. I'm not arrogant, I'm confident. That's just who I am. And I'm not gonna shy myself down to make you feel like you better than I am. I'm just not that person, you know? And I've always been the type of person that I stand on what I believe, you know? So Chicago, at the time, I wasn't getting a lot of love, so I started doing my own comedy rooms. So every night I had a room somewhere doing comedy, and I started booking comics. So that's how I started getting pretty cool with different comedians. But I was still like in Chicago blackballed by a particular comic that had a lot of juice. So when I went overseas, and I, with the guy, and the girl she couldn't be the host. She didn't have it. So I explained to the gentleman who was the promoter, I can do this, man. I can help you host. I can help you do this. I can help you do that. Because I did a lot of this stuff doing my own shows. So long story short, it worked. We ended up clicking. And so that one show I did for him, I ended up hosting that tour for 2.5 years. I did Germany, the Netherlands, and the UK, and Belgium every month for 2.5 years. I would be over there for 2 weeks and home for 2 weeks. And so during that period of time, I started really, I guess after the 2 years, I started looking at life different, because I started taking certain words out of like the N word, the B word, and things of that nature. And another thing started bothering me was that these soldiers' wives will be all over us when they gone. Their husbands are deployed. And then when their husband would come back, he'd be so excited to meet me or take pictures with me. And I felt a certain way. You know, I was like, this dude risking his life for us, this country. And I'm kicking it with his wife or his girl or whatever. And that's something I've had to take out of my equation. That ain't something, I don't want to be that type of person. I appreciate what he's doing, so I want him to, know I respect him. He didn't know it, or the person might not know it, but I knew it. And just like when the wives will come later on, I'll be like, nah, I ain't for it, you know. And it did, excuse me, it started changing. So when I started coming back to Chicago, I couldn't get a lot of gigs. So what I started doing, a friend of mine, me and him started Christian Comedy Network. So we started doing clean comedy. So he asked me to do a clean comedy show. I was like, I don't know how to do no clean, I don't think I'd be good for clean comedy. And something hit me because I would tell my grandmother jokes all the time when I come around her. So it hit me, it said, tell the jokes just like you talking to your grandmother. And that's how I ended up getting to start doing clean comedy. I would look at it as if I was telling a joke to my seniors or my grandmother or my parents, because I don't use profanity around my parents or my grandparents. And so that's how, now I did clean comedy for, I guess 20 years. Now I'm at a point now that I was told by another comedian that's been in the game a long time, I finally got my Richard Pryor awakening. What most people don't know what that means is, when Richard Pryor started doing comedy, he was trying to be like Bill Cosby. He was doing it clean, he was doing, the way, and it really wasn't him. One day he was in Las Vegas and he was doing a set and he just stopped in the middle and said, I can't do this. This ain't who I am. And he walked off stage. They blackballed him from Las Vegas for years for that. But he went to San Francisco and he started doing him and talking about his life and who he is. That's where I'm at now. I want to talk about my life has been so, I've had like 5 different lives in one lifetime. So like I say, I'm an ex-drug addict, gangbanger, pimp, womanizer, so many different things that, I was so negative that comedy, I'm at a point that I can give a message and teach some people so they don't have to go through some of the stuff I went through. But at the same time, to laugh about it because it didn't kill me. Whatever won't kill you will make you stronger. And that's what it did for me.
Yeah, so I'm seeing that common theme of destiny and things kind of lining up. And it's amazing just to hear your story as you go through this. Is there a difference between just for anybody out there, like going down the road of clean comedy versus unclean comedy? If that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
The clean comedy, you can go mainstream, you can TV, things of that nature. I do a lot of churches and things of that nature. Now, unclean, you have more of a following though. Unclean, you gonna make more money. Because there's more people out there that listen to that than they do clean comedy. And to each his own, whatever way you want to do, just find out what type of comic you want to be. You're gonna get something from this comic, you're gonna get something from that comic, but you have to look deep inside of you because your story is your story. Yeah. And nobody can tell your story. They didn't live your life. So this is why I feel like I'm at a point now that I need to tell my story in a way that I might have to use profanity in some words because they won't get the message the way it should be. Right. That urban grind.
Yeah. So with that said, you also mentioned a situation where Bill Cosby walked off the stage.
Richard Pryor.
Richard Pryor walked off the stage. Were you trying to do the clean comedy?
Yes.
Right. So what is that feeling while you're on stage? What is that feeling of discontent or uncomfortable? Like what makes you say I can't do this anymore?
When you're at the point that you have to, every time you're talking, you're doing the material, you're not really being in your funny state because you want to be politically correct. You don't want nothing to slip out that might be negative, you know, a cuss word or even topics. In clean comedy, certain topics you can't talk about.
Right.
You know, sex to a certain point, but you can't get into the aspect of sex when you're doing clean comedy. You know, so those are the things that I had to look at, and I was like, you know, we're in a world now, in a place now, in a time now that you got to be strictly raw and bring it to them straight like they got to get with no chaser. Because there's so much in the world now, you can do something, but you can't talk about it. Comedy right now is at a bad place because there's so many things that you can't talk about, and people are so sensitive now. And I don't understand that because the world is wild now, much wilder than it was back in Richard's time and Bernie's time, you know. So that's kind of where I'm at with clean comedy and, you know, using profanity.
Okay. So you've been on platforms like BET, Comic View, like you mentioned, and also Comedy Central.
Comedy Central's Laugh Riot.
And Laugh Riot.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say the difference is between, you know, doing clubs versus doing production? And also explain a little bit about what was the Laugh Riot competition experience like working with other comedians? Was it challenging? Was it fun? Was it hard? You know.
Okay, you threw a bunch of stuff out there.
Yeah.
We're gonna start with the challenging of being out there with like doing a comic view or something with other comics.
Yeah.
The thing with that is that it's not really, some comics use it as competition. I use it as I'm gonna bring what I bring. You know, I'm not battling you, I ain't not battling you. What I wanna do is get my story out and do it the way that I know I can do it.
Right.
And that I'm at my funniest.
Yeah.
Doing comic view and things like that, when you're being filmed, it's one thing. Because comic view, you couldn't cuss. You know, so it was a good thing for me. I enjoyed it. But then you had Def Jam and things like that you could cuss. I never did Def Jam, but I've done shows like Comic Cube, where we filmed in California, and you could use profanity then. And those particular shows were, it's about the same, but the content is a lot different of what you can talk about and what you can't talk about. You know, and how the people are gonna receive you.
Yeah.
You know, versus some people that are gonna be judgmental of
Yeah. Okay. And can you kind of walk us through your creative process and how you turn like, everyday experiences into relatable, hilarious material?
you. Yeah, so for instance, let's say, like my teeth, for instance, I waited till I got 60 that I could afford to get my teeth straightened and things of that nature. So for years, I had crooked teeth, skinny, this, that, and the other. And a lot of people would constantly, somebody talking about you, your skinny self, your crooked teeth, would make them, you know, look down at their self or hurt their feelings. Me, on the other hand, I thought it was cool because, okay, you done started something now. Now I can talk about them shoes you got on, to your nappy hair, to your split ear that you done set up there and tried to pierce 5 times and it finally just tore open. You understand me? Different things. I take whatever it is and turn it into something that can be used for humor. Whether I see a dog with 3 legs, you know, that ain't normal, but he can still run, you understand me? He still can eat, he still has a purpose. So I'll take it and make it funny, but at the end of the funny, I'll show his purpose, you know? And that's what I want, that's what I do with comedy with us.
Yeah.
I find our purpose.
Nice. So what was some of your favorite, most memorable moments through your performances today?
One of my favorites was, of course, Comic View. Bruce was hosting. And it was, you had, see, I like to dress. So I was sharp. came. I was funny, I was sharp, and I looked good. And I was like, this is what it's about. This is what the Kings of Comedy is about. Me looking the part, being the part, and bringing the people what they came to see. And that was one of the best feelings. And then getting on, every day, going to a different location to do comedy. I love that. I love the traveling aspect of comedy. I love coming to a new place. I get a newspaper, read about, what is going on in that particular city. Every city has projects. It has the ghetto. So all I need to know is the name of the ghetto, and I talk about the ghetto, and they think I live there. So these were things that I've learned through doing comedy, little things and perks that older comics would pour into me. You need to do this, you need to do that. And the purpose of everything, I think, is to be able to stand on a stage with somebody you look up to and knowing I'm on that level as well. I was blessed to work with Steve Harvey. Bernie Mac came out. Deion Cole, I worked with him plenty of times. Marlon Wayans, John Weatherspoon, you name it, I've just about worked with them. But what I did was I found another gift that I had in me, which was hosting concerts. So I host a lot of concerts now as well. So I done work with the Smokey Robinsons and the different people like that, and Jeffrey Osborne and Mary Mary and Kirk Franklin and different people like that. And to be on that stage and that platform, that's the best feeling. You say one feeling I can't give you. Every time I step on, I'm nervous, but when I step on that stage, I know I'm at home. And that's the feeling I always want to be with.
So what would you say, working with all these different comedians that have really made a name for themselves, what would you say some of the skills or wisdom that they all had in common that you were able to kind of take away from and incorporate that into your journey?
I'd say number one was knowing what your style of comedy. Each one of them had their own unique style. Deion Cole, D-Ray, Corey Holcomb. Not trying to mimic somebody else, but creating a new character. And that's something that I have, brought within myself, is that BLT, when people talk about him, he's a clean comedian, but he can make anybody laugh. So he does all comedy, not just clean comedy. And in doing that, to look at them and see, where do I want to be in the comedy world? What do I want to be looked at in the comedy world? A lot of people, you can say what you want, but for me, Hollywood is not where I want to really go. Hollywood is crazy. If you look at Hollywood and the people that are in Hollywood, majority of them selling their soul. And that's not something, I'm comfortable. I have a great life. I have grandchildren. I have 14 grandchildren. I have 9 children. I get up when I want to. I got some real estate. I've done some things and I'm comfortable. And I don't need Hollywood or to have all these people in my life in order to make me feel like I'm somebody. So with that being said, I look at the Corey, I look at the Deion, and I wish them the best. I'm proud of them and everything, but that's not what I want.
Okay, so that's a good transition to where we want to go next. So you're not just a comedian, you're also an entrepreneur. So tell us about BLT Entertainment and the vision behind it.
All right, BLT Entertainment, I created that in 2008. I went and I hosted a concert called The Sultry Singing Men of Soul. And what it was a play about 5 different very white Luther Vandross, Jackie Wilson, Sam Cooke, Curtis Mayfield, different people like that. And they were mimicking and sound exactly like the artist. And it was a play, so I looked at that and I told the lady, I was like, I would love to do this as a concert. So she thought I was stealing her idea. She fired me, of course. But I started doing the shows. And what BLT Entertainment did was we put shows together with singers that sound exactly like the real artist. It's called When Music Was at Its Best. Now, I've been doing these shows since '08. I slowed down this past year, and then BLT Entertainment went into booking other artists, from musicians to comedians to you name it. So that's another area that BLT Entertainment covers. And last but not least, it covers me.
Right.
I'm my own boss. I'm the CEO, and I push stuff for BLT, the comedian, as well as BLT, the actor.
All right. So, what is some of the biggest lessons you've learned as a business owner in the entertainment industry?
Don't trust everybody. People they'll talk to the side of their neck forever if you'll stand there and listen. What you have to do is you have to know what your goal is, who you're surrounding yourself around, because you are only as smart as the people you're in that circle with. So if you the smartest person, you ain't going real far. I learned to elevate and get around people that have what I'm looking for or where I want to go. And that's one of my biggest catalysts, is that I grab that rope and I hold on that tight knot. And I've learned from real estate to you name it, snow removals. It's not much. I'm a hustler. So I don't have problems. I'm always look at the long game, like I said. Buy a bunch of snow blowers, do residential snow removal. Do the shows, book singers, book the band, book the sound people, book the venue, design the flyers, put the flyers out there. It's a whole, what BLT Entertainment covers. So I do from booking the acts, the band, getting the musicians, to the venue, to the sound people, to my bartenders, to the people that's working at the door, so the whole 9 yards.
Okay. And so how do you balance your artistic side with the business side of what you do?
And my wife would always say, I make everything a joke. That's how I balance life.
Yeah.
I really do. Because, what I'm going to get upset and bent out of shape for, if I can't change it, I have to deal with it.
So you built a reputation for bringing joy to families and communities. What does that mean to you personally?
What that means is that I can come into a place, a room, or come around people and change the narrative of where they are mentally, to bring them some laughter, people look at me and smile. I remember it was a day when I was gang banging and doing all kind of crazy stuff, but they went the other way.
Right.
But I know my presence does something to people, because if the first thing they do when they see you, they face lights up and they smile.
Okay. What is some advice that you have for aspiring comedians, especially those who want to make people laugh with purpose?
Find out what's your goal as a comedian, first of all. How can your comedy help the world versus just helping yourself? Because right now, comedy is a lot of skits. A lot of comics making money off doing skits and things of that nature. But when they get on stage, they don't have no time.
Right.
So for comics that's coming up, it's a different day now. You can film yourself and put it on YouTube, and millions of people can see you. Versus my time, you had to go to different comedy clubs.
Right.
So put you something out there that you can be proud of, push the narrative, and it's so many areas in comedy you can go, from being a writer to a stand-up comedian to a comical actor, things of that nature. It's a lot of different areas. It's not just stand-up.
Nice. And you know what? With that said, that's interesting. How would you say that some of the old school ways of getting yourself out there, like traveling and all that, what would you say hasn't changed, even though there is social media? How can you still bring some of those lessons and wisdom to social media?
I say what hasn't changed is walking on that stage. That will never change. When you feel that presence, you in there with 2,000 people, and you telling a joke, and that laughter comes like a roar, and it hits you. Because comedy is nothing but timing. It's like a musician. When I'm in that zone, it's on now. They laughing too, and I can feel them. Oh, that will never change.
Okay, so what's next for comedian BLT? You got any upcoming projects or shows that you're excited about?
Actually, we have right now. I have a movie. We get ready to start shooting in a couple of days with a gentleman named Barry Brewer. I have a radio show on 106.3 FM, a major radio station here in Chicago. I'm on every Sunday from 4 to 5. It's called More Smiles of Beverly. I have shows that I'm doing, getting ready to start doing at the Gloria Taylor, which was going to be when music was at its best again. And we're going to do those monthly, as well as now I'm hitting the road. Me and B. Cole getting ready to hit the road together.
Okay. So with all that said and done, what legacy do you hope to leave, not just as a comedian, but as a person?
My legacy I'm pushing to leave is a person with integrity, a person with kindness, a person that is gonna walk in his shoes and not nobody else's shoes. And whatever pebbles that I have to step on, I step on because I'm gonna come out of it. And I want to teach my children, my grandchildren, and other people that come around me that whatever you're going through, it doesn't last. It will get better, but you have to take the time and sit back and get with self and spiritual presence and pour into yourself. What do I want? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? What do I want to have? Because we look at other people's cars, houses, and things of that nature, and what make them happy might not make you happy. We look at a Rolls, man, I want a Rolls Royce. Can you afford a Rolls Royce? Get the things that make you happy. This is what my legacy is gonna be. You get the things and do the things that make you happy, not what the world is happy about, what you doing. I want to give a shout out to Dale & Company Media. Thank y'all so much for this interview. I didn't expect it, but I appreciate it. And I hope we can do a lot more things, a lot of stuff together. I'm excited. Come on, let's do this.